Perfect. Jana is our first person who's joined the call. Hi, Jana.
All right. Hello, Jana.
It's really great. And so attendees can now join us. We'll give them a second because not everybody's always there on the dot.
Let me see if we can rope Loïc in. I think he's trying on another link.
No, he's here. He's here. There you go. He will appear in a second.
Cool.
Here we go. Perfect. Hello, Loïc. Lovely to have you here as well. And just as big a hello to our audience. It's really nice to see some names that I know before. There are some brand new names as well. So if this is your first live session with us, you're very welcome. Today is an extra fun one because we're joined by Wikifactory. It's not just TFF today, which is my great joy. Perfect. And maybe some of you already know the TFF startups a little bit now. We've had some join previous live sessions. And so today you hear more from our TFF entrepreneurs and also Wikifactory entrepreneurs. So as always, we also have some brand new faces and a global audience from various different countries calling in, which is what we love to do. So then I would say, let's launch into it. And those who missed the first few seconds will be able to just dive straight in when they join. So today's topical roundtable is all about how hardware startups are growing food for the new normal. And it is co-organized by Wikifactory. So Nico here, with his lovely background, is from Wikifactory, who is a partner of TFF. So with the pandemic, there's been an upsurge in homegrown food and local delivery solutions. How are the food and ag hardware entrepreneurs adapting to the changing landscape? Are they taking advantage of online tools that enable mass collaboration and open source knowledge to build more sophisticated solutions? We're joined today by some great entrepreneurs in this space, and we'll talk a little bit about COVID, and we'll talk a little bit about being an entrepreneur, and we'll talk a lot about hardware solutions. So because we're here with Wikifactory, we'll start off with a quick intro to Thought for Food and then to Wikifactory. I'm Marie, I'm the Thought for Food community manager. And Thought for Food is the world's next-gen entrepreneur engine for food and ag. So we are a huge community of Gen Zs, millennials, change makers who want to make food and ag more sustainable. We support our entrepreneurs and we connect the dots in our global community that's coming from over 175 countries, so that wherever you are at whatever time, whenever you're ready, you can make a difference where you are. And that is locally relevant. And ideally, what we love is globally scalable, with a word that we call glocal. And the best part of TFF is we like to use a multispectral energy, which means we are not looking at things unidirectional. We are mixing all our viewpoints, our cultures, our backgrounds, our knowledge together to create our changes and to make a difference in the world and to make sure that we're transitioning into a more sustainable food and agriculture system. There are lots of ways to get involved with us that I'm not going to list here because we don't have all that time for it, but do check us out on our website, thoughtforfood.org. And we partner with lots of great people like Wikifactory. And so Nico, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Thank you, Marie, for that wonderful introduction. My name is Nico Loïc, and I'm the Community and Partnerships Lead for Wikifactory. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be hosting our first joint webinar with Thought for Food on such an interesting topic. I guess just to follow up with your little intro there, Marie, I guess one of the inspirations for this topic was in the current global pandemic, which we're witnessing on Wikifactory, a surge in projects related to ag tech, urban farming, sustainable food production, environmental monitoring, ecological rewilding, and a lot of other food-related innovation. So I think if the current crisis with all its disruption is saying anything, it's a stark reminder of just how fragile our food systems and supply chains really are. And if we include the bigger picture of climate change and issues related to food insecurity and diminishing access to arable land in many parts of the world, etc., I think the question of how we are going to grow food for the future couldn't be more timely. So again, I thank Thought for Food for this incredible initiative, and we're really thrilled to be partnering on this joint webinar. Let me just take a second to maybe give you a little background on Wikifactory. So Wikifactory is the first collaborative internet platform that takes product development from design to manufacturing in one singular workspace. On the technical front, Wikifactory provides us a number of professional online tools that allow teams to upload, visualize, and collaborate on a host of different CAD formats. So you can use your browser or your tablet or your mobile to really visualize, regardless of the type of CAD program you use to design your project. Wikifactory also offers version control, issue tracking, and expert documentation features that allow projects to document and discuss their project, as well as helping connect projects to a distributed network of trusted manufacturing partners. So basically our platform offers a bunch of features, as well as a free plan for projects that want to share their designs openly and collaborate with the wider community on product development. And then we also offer a paid plan for private workspaces that allow projects more access control and role-based permission settings, which currently this month, if you are interested to trialing out Wikifactory, we have a 30-day free trial for individual projects and teams that want to try these features without sort of putting all their designs out in public. And you can find a lot of the links in our chat, in the chat box. But in short, what Wikifactory really does is help startups, new businesses, and innovators streamline the often tedious and detail-driven process that takes a product from design to manufacturing. And the current features that we host on the platform sort of allow projects to sort of streamline this process. But Wikifactory is also a bit more than that. We are also a social platform that has been growing together with a talented community of over 30,000 innovators, makers, designers, engineers, and entrepreneurs who are innovating openly and using open source to turn their ideas into a reality. And we host many successful open source projects around topics of agtech, mobility, robotics, drones, as well as STEAM education, and more recently, the incredible innovation we're seeing around specifically the COVID-19 response. So yeah, I'm very thrilled for this webinar. And I guess to kick off, I just wanted to give another shout out to Thought for Food, as we have this incredible partnership going. And this is our first joint webinar. And I'm thrilled that we are sharing our networks to inspire innovation in agriculture, food growing, as well as helping projects and businesses grow and innovate in these complex times. So without further ado, perhaps let's open to maybe an introductory round of questions for our panelists. And maybe should I pass it on to Marie to kick us off?
Yes, thank you so much, Nico. For any of you, if you want to get involved with either Wikifactory or Thought for Food, just reach out to us. And because we are lovely partners, we'll just link you up with whoever you wanted to talk to. As always, guys in the audience, you're able to interact with us in the chat or drop some questions in the Q&A. What we're going to do is we're going to chat with our lovely 4 panelists here for an hour. And then in the last section, we'll take some questions from the audience. So if you can't think of a question yet, just drop them in when you're ready. And with that, let's hear from our entrepreneurs. I would love to know where you're based, because this is always a great thing, because we're always all over the place. I myself am in Belgium today. and then tell us a little bit about what your hardware solution is, maybe, you know, what the motivation was to even build a hardware solution. So what problem were you attacking with it? I am going to pick on one of you to start this off. So why don't we have Marcela from GrowCab start us off?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mary. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Marcela. I'm a co-founder and CEO of GrowCab. I'm based in Denmark, but actually my team or the rest of my team is in UK. I met them when I was doing my PhD at Oxford, but we were, since we started this project, we were always been like in different cities, and this was never been a problem to develop a project. So that is, it's something that you, or I like to think that is never a problem, like at the distance if you are not in the same city or not. Well, basically, or I want to like a GrowCab is a cabinet that use like it's a controlled environment cabinet with a precise optimal light. And this is used for having a speed breeding. With a speed breeding, you can get a higher or more generation of time of plants in less time, so that we can improve the growth of the plant and the plant in shortened time. So, for example, like in wheat, you normally need a year to have a cycle of your plant in the field. To have any results. So if you want to have a crop improvement, for example, you want to test a trait in breeding plants, you need to wait 1 year to know if that you have that result or not. With the speed breeding, you can have, for example, in wheat, up to 6 generations of time in that same in this environment. Unfortunately, speed breeding is like the grow rooms and everything are super expensive. And we were thinking, okay, if you need certain, or you need to know some certain, like at the light and the temperature before going big, why do not scale instead of up, down, this speed breeding system, and giving the opportunity to breeders or research centers that they don't have enough money to have these super expensive growth rooms, have the opportunity to use the speed breeding to start to test this changing or to have these generations of time. And then once that they know exactly what they need, then go for it for the kind of like at the next step. So basically, yeah, we scale down this speed breeding to give access to more research centers the option to have it this.
Awesome, thank you so much. So here we've got a tool for plant breeders. Loïc, your solution involves some plants as well. So I'm going to pick on you next. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've developed?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Perfectly, go for it.
Perfect. Hi everyone, so my name is Loïc. I'm originally from Luxembourg, and right now I'm joining you from Barcelona. I'm the founder of the Green and Blue, which is a company that's dedicated to developing and implementing aquaponics systems. So for those of you maybe are not familiar with aquaponics, I'm just going to go over it very quickly. It's essentially a system that produces crops without soil. But unlike hydroponics, which is more widely known, it takes its fertilizer from fish poo. Right, so what we do is we transform fish poo into fertilizer for plants, which are in the same system. So it's a circular system that produces its own fertilizer, and that's what's always fascinated me about it. It's how it teaches us how nature produces food, essentially, and that's what I think is the most interesting with aquaponics. If you compare it to conventional agriculture, it produces crops about 3 times faster, and it uses about 10 times less water. Right? If you compare it with the same surface of land. So I think that's what makes it really interesting and what fascinated me about it. Also, the fact it doesn't rely on soil means that it's an ideal technology to grow food in urban areas, right? Where you probably don't have a patch of soil available to grow your food. So essentially the idea comes from, I think, the realization that by 2050, we'll need to essentially increase our food production by 70%. So since we're in this talk, maybe that's not news to most of you, but the implication is that we're not going to be able to continue doing it the way we're doing it now, because we just simply don't have that extra 70% of fertile land available. So with that realization comes the fact that, all right, we're going to have to change the way we produce food. And although I don't believe aquaponics is the miracle solution, I think that it can be part of the solution in urban areas in particular. So just a bit about my background. Around 2015, I discovered this technology, got really interested in it, and co-founded the Aquaponics nonprofit. And the idea of Aquaponics was to build an aquaponics community to tell everyone about it, essentially, and develop an open source aquaponics system. So we succeeded in doing that, but we also failed in making it a sustainable business. So while we sold way too many kits to maintain our team, we started getting requests of people around the world that wanted to set up their aquaponics systems and didn't know how to. They needed the technical support to make that happen. So kind of naturally, we started consulting with those people, and eventually this pivot, to call it something like that, happened in 2019, early 2019, when we created the Green and Blue company. So right now, Green and Blue essentially does consulting for people that want to set up from a small aquaponic demonstration system to commercial aquaponic farms, and we help them get through with that. So this is basically what Green and Blue has become since then. All right, so yeah, thanks everyone.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that story as well. I love the development from wanting to build a hardware solution and then finding a way to make it into a profitable and sustainable company, which is great. So moving on to our next person working with aqua farming. Fajar, do you want to tell us about what you do?
Okay, sure. Hi everyone, I'm Fajar. I'm from Indonesia, but currently I'm continuing my study in Sweden. So basically our projects or our startup is about the technology that an integrated technology in aquaculture. Basically it's consists of 3 components: the microbubble generator, the IoT sensor, and the last one is the solar panel. So basically the microbubble generator has been proved to increase the dissolved oxygen in the water up to 7 ppm and able to increase the fish weight up to 40% compared to the other common aerator like paddle wheel aerator. And then we start to integrate it with the IoT sensor so that we can monitor the condition of the water. And after that, the sensor can automatically control the microbubble generator. So when the dissolved oxygen is high, it will turn off the microbubble generator. And when the dissolved oxygen is low, it will automatically turn on the microbubble generator. All of the technology is powered by the solar panel because the aquaculture site in Indonesia, a lot of them is located in rural area. So it will be very useful for them because it is very affordable for them. And although it's quite pricey, but it will make them can access the electricity for them. Yeah, basically that's about our project. Thank you. Amazing,
thank you. And Jonathan, with a background that I thought was not real, but it is real. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, guys, and nice to meet you all. It is real, I promise. It looks like that from the other side. So I'm Jonathan Minchin. I'm on agroecology dryland projects in the south of Catalonia, next to the river Ebro. It's a place that I'm sort of developing and testing tools upon. So I'm a co-founder of the open source BeeHives, and I'll also talk to you about ROMI, which is a European Horizon 2020 project for robotics for microfarms. So around 2013, working in BeeHives Labs in the Green Fab Lab in Barcelona. One of the first projects that we identified was a necessity for support for bee health. So I'm talking about the European honeybee, which is our client in this case. It's the Apis mellifera. At that point in time, there was a lot of news about colony collapse disorder, which is essentially a loss of bees through to disease, compounding pressures, pesticides, loss of land and habitat. And as a group, this is set between Barcelona and Denver in Colorado, we decided, a number of us decided to design some beehives and some sensing hardware kits that would promote good beekeeping practices and help in a community citizen science project to extract good data from a hive, which expert beekeepers and scientists will be able to analyze and look at bee behaviors. So our kits, our sensor kits, open source, downloadable from our platform, which has been running for many years. We had a kind of triangulation between makers, beekeepers, and the scientific community who didn't always communicate very well with the same language structures, but I felt as makers we were able to bridge the gap between that. We've created sensing kits which monitor primarily the audio frequencies from beehives. Then we use data signature recognition learning algorithm to identify audio patterns and identify particular behaviors in the bees. So it's a little bit like learning bee language. Some things we know what they're doing and a lot of things that we don't. There's a long way to go. So we sell those kits, various different iterations, as well as the hives. But we primarily now provide the service of audio data identification. Quickly, ROMI is a 4-year investigation between multiple European partners. It's a Horizon 2020 project funded by the European Commission. We create a robotics platform that allows us to primarily monitor from below the soil to plant phenotyping and identification, from cable bots to drones, which tie to satellite data. From that data, we can support farmers with spectral analysis or identifying patterns or crop potential problems. But also we can manipulate and work on the ground level as well. So this is in support of what a micro farm is, smaller than 5 hectares, almost always an organic farm with polyculture, complex cropping patterns. So we use light, electric, robotic tools to be able to work in that complex environment and reduce the need for things like pesticides and support the plant ecosystem by close and adaptive monitoring. And that's me, thanks.
Amazing. I'm a little overwhelmed at the incredible range of projects that we have here represented, from sort of IoT bubble generator, aquaponics systems, bee monitoring, robotics, speed growing. So it's really incredible to have such a range of innovation. I'm curious as to, a lot of these projects seem to be initiatives that are responding to both growing environmental pressures and crises, as well as opportunities that can relate to our current food systems. I'm wondering how does the current COVID-19 pandemic, how has this current pandemic and crisis impacted your projects? I guess this is a general question to all of you, but I'm just wondering, how are you seeing your projects both adapt or respond to this current crisis? Are you seeing a sort of change in awareness with our public awareness in relation to food, in relation to the food supply chain, or in relation to the environment in general? Perhaps John, as you were last, maybe I could send this back your way.
No problem. It's a great question. I guess we'll do it in reverse this time. So I was in Vidauda Labs, which is a 130 hectare research facility for self-sufficiency during the COVID outbreak. So it was a place that I used to manage and coordinate. But during the lockdown, all other staff members left Vidauda, which meant there was myself and 20 researchers who weren't going to leave for 3 months. Now we have gardens there, a very small. It's not even a micro farm. It's like it's a mini farm. It's quite small, but we have a multitude of different crops. I had discovered that when we were doing social agriculture, this could be termed as community supported agriculture, we would have volunteers days every week. With those volunteers now not able to come to the farm, it was up to the researchers and I to continue it. We had a real problem with getting any sort of delivery of any food at all to the community, especially in the beginning, which meant that we turned to the farm and the plot, and our self-sufficiency project became a bit more of a reality and a necessity. We were able to work directly, but what we found is there's a lot of manual labor. There's a lot to take care of on an organic farm, and it's not easy. We had ups and downs, but I think that a lot of innovation and a lot of support for that particular sector needs to be worked into future investment and innovation to make organic agriculture effective. We were doing more than 0 kilometer. This was more like 10-meter agriculture. So from farm to fork, it was less than 10 meters in many cases, which I think is great for sustainable farming, localism. During the time, we were also able to do some innovation with the bees. So having already had a network, I was able to design a new hive, release new files, and do quite a lot of development in a networked sense. That's because these are community practitioners. They are backyard beekeepers, they are amateur professionals, and they're from all over the world, and they're enthusiastic. Romy, on the other hand, with robotics for microfarms, was connected to companies, research institutions like Sony, universities like Humboldt University in Berlin, which all closed down. So that meant that it was difficult to continue development work on Romy because of the situation of closure for the partners. So the two kind of perspectives of organic agriculture being great, but a lot of work when you're in isolation, needing new tools. The open source BeeHives, great. Bees don't stop. But the robotics we found difficult because of dependencies on labs and resources. But that was it was an interesting COVID experience, but the projects are now picking up and carrying on.
Amazing, John. That actually kind of links, I think, quite interestingly to Marcela, your experience you were mentioning briefly with your team that I think are distributed a little bit around between the UK and Denmark, and also connected to some research labs. Has the current crisis sort of impacted your access to these labs and facilities?
Yeah, well, right now we're in a very early stage as a startup, so we don't have any products yet selling or anything, but we were improving our prototype, and we needed to stop in that sense because they couldn't go, the guys that are doing the prototype at the moment, they couldn't go to the lab. But the good thing is we started to organize a lot of the things that we had behind. So we take advantage of this time to kind of, for example, now we're having a better manual, documentations. For example, in Wikifactory, we started to have a more detailed points, because we had our cabinet, we know how to do it, and actually we published a paper of the cabinet, and we thought that was kind of clear enough, but you know that not always is that sense. So we noticed that we needed more improvement. So we started to do that. We started as well to have a better business model of our company, because our first thought was, okay, we did this cabinet and we have it there, open access, we put it outside, everyone have the instructions, everyone can do it. But we actually were contact for a lot of people, a lot of researchers around, and say, okay, yes, I have your instructions, but I really want you to come here and give a workshop, or we want an extra information. So, and we want the product, but at the same time we have full-time as a researchers. Each of us, we work in different projects in the lab. So we thought, okay, we can't do this by ourselves. So we started to do more like a company. So we organized this time to make more like a structured company. So good thing we didn't lose much time in that. But interestingly, we saw in the community or in the society, that now they're looking, for example, with all the problem in some parts of the world with having food in the supermarkets, they started to look more like a local products. And that was also very targeting with our aim. Our aim is to have this speed breeding in local crops, or we call it like orphan crops, not like the big ones like wheat or barley or soybean. Because these ones, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of resources, they can do research in these crops with no problem. But we wanted to target crops where they are not very economically, worthwhile. So, but they are very important for local communities. So actually, this COVID-19 helped us to make awareness about looking more like a local crops. And actually now we have that extra thing, because when we were trying to kind of make this project or share it with more people, that kind of things like a local crop, oh yeah, it could be, that is a very social awareness, or really nice. But actually now with this pandemic, they start to say, okay, I think we need to actually improve as well the local production. So in that terms, we are taking advantage of this situation to improve our product physically, but as well more in terms of being more strong outside, and the more people can have it.
I absolutely love that. Especially, so TFF always loves these small crops, these local relevant crops. And it's mad because globally we rely on less than 20 species when there are so many plants out there, and we just eat those like fairly boring, but you know, all right, 20 ones. So I'm intrigued to see what comes next and what kind of fun crops you're going to use in your cabinets. Fajar, we heard a little bit about, you know, them using the time to reorganize. You guys also had direct trials with villages where you were working with them on their ponds. How did that change in COVID?
Actually, this COVID-19 condition is very bad for us because we just got funding from one company last year, and we want to do a lot of pilot projects this year, but unfortunately the COVID-19 condition changed it all. But there's a positive side because we can do a lot of alternatives for our steps and for our milestones. We have contact with some of local government in Indonesia, like Bali government. So actually our projects can be collaborate with them. So we can make like an economic healing from the aquaculture side. So there's a lot of potential in Indonesia in aquaculture, but that potential is not utilized maximally yet. So with this COVID-19 conditions, the local government start to look for some alternative to like heal their economy. And we propose our projects to them. And fortunately, they start to recognize that this project is very, very useful for the local economy in their region to be healed. So this Banoo projects next year will start to apply it in Bali, in some village. But the conditions currently we are start to developing a new design for the microbubble generator, and then try to like doing a small research about the IoT center and start to developing the apps so that can it can be used more easily for the fish farmers that have not good background education.
That's amazing, Fajar, and super interesting. I think we'll maybe touch a little bit on the topic of government and administrative support, and how that's sort of how projects are involving that, or how that's changing the current the sort of current environment. Loïc, maybe we could get your input a little bit. I know that you've had to diversify a little bit of your green and blues businesses during the lockdown.
Yeah, that's correct. Actually, the impact has been pretty huge for us. And it started out pretty bad. Like, I'm not gonna lie, we were mid-March, and essentially the consulting services went down. We had nobody interested in services at that point. It's slowly picking up now, but apart from that, the production from our experimental greenhouse, we usually sell to a restaurant. So the restaurant closed, and so it didn't look all that great at that point. It was pretty much a disaster. But then we were trying to get rid of our crops that we had in the greenhouse, and we were like, as much as we could eat part of it, we just couldn't deal with all of that. So we tried to get that to the public. And as we did, people were moderately interested in that, but at the same time, they kept asking us for plants. They said, hey, can you bring us seedlings for our gardens? Like, it's spring, we're not able to get out and buy plants. So could you bring us some of your plants? And so it started out as a silly idea, and so we just wanted to test that. We said, all right, I mean, we got nothing to lose at this point. So we published a post on Facebook, and the response was pretty incredible. So we organized as we could to go to a major seedling provider and started taking orders from people. So we organized, say, a home delivery system of seedlings for people's gardens. So it all went pretty fast, and since people were like on social media 24 hours, we used that to advertise the seedlings through social media advertising, and that actually turned out to work really well. So, I mean, it happened quite quickly, and over 2 months, we delivered about 400 gardens. People were really happy because some of them are planters, and many of them actually are not. And that's why I want to get back to the question you mentioned before about public awareness. So the data is that more than 70% of our clients had never had a garden before. It was their first try. So that was really something that resonated for us, because it meant that all of those people that usually would have never thought about that, suddenly in this crisis, they're like, oh, all right, I mean, what do we do when we have to provide for ourselves? So that was really encouraging for us, and that was nice. And apart from that, it maintained our company during 2 months where there was absolute standstill. So so that was good. We were able to continue going to our greenhouse and doing basic maintenance because the food sector had to continue, so we didn't have those kind of issues. And then it also meant something larger for the company as such. It made actually pretty big strategic change, because one thing that we did realize was that consulting services are great, but they work when people have money, when the economies work, and when they don't, and everything is standing still, you don't really need consulting services. So what people do need always, and that was really clear during this period, is food. They're not going to stop buying food. If anything, they're going to buy more. That's what the data says. So we decided to make a pivot again on a strategic level. And essentially right now, since we have a bit more time on our hands, we're working on our own aquaponic farm that we want to set up here about 20 kilometers from Barcelona. And we're hoping to start building in September, October. So it's been, let's say, the opportunity to just reflect on what we're doing and where the business is going. And yeah, we're pretty excited about developments.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's super interesting. I think we're seeing this balance between obviously dealing with the disruption and dealing with obviously the big part of the service sector and economy around the restaurants has been severely impacted, and obviously dealing with that disruption has, I can see that being quite difficult, especially in your case, Loïc. But on the other side, sort of seeing where does this sort of open up possibilities for innovation and for trying out something new. I think we've all been, in our own ways, forced to try something else and to try something new. So this has been very interesting, I think, in all our projects. I guess maybe on a bit of a follow-up question, what do you all think that that needs to? Are there any sort of important changes that you think need to happen when it comes to whether it's sort of government regulation or administrative support in trying to encourage both innovation and adapting to this new normal? I think this current crisis has definitely shown us the fragility of our food systems and also our supply chains. So I'm wondering whether what you think, what sort of changes maybe you'd like to see happen on the administrative side, on the government side, to sort of encourage a shift towards a more sustainable or maybe a more positive and in sort of a more encouraging towards the innovation that some of your projects are undertaking. Sorry, that was a bit of a general question, but yeah, anyone who wants to take that.
Yeah, I can start with that, no problem. Well, actually, as a crop researcher and as well researcher in biotechnology, I always, or what I struggle more is actually the the laws are always quite behind. Sometimes they don't keep the same pace than the research. So sometimes you can have some resources that are already in the lab. So you can have some solutions For example, we know that we need more food and we know that we need better systems, and you can have some of that answers there in the lab, but because the laws are not keeping in pace to change that technology from the lab maybe to field trials or something like that, then it's quite difficult. So we can see in this moment, for example, with the COVID vaccine, that all that is changing too much or very quick, but it's just focusing on one thing, and maybe they are kind of targeting that. But in the future, we are going to have the other problems, like for example, all the diseases in crops, and as well like the climate change, and we need better crops there. But sometimes we can't do the field trials. So what I would like to see actually is that the government also make these changes at the same pace as we have the solutions sometimes in the lab. I'm not saying that everything can go straight from the lab to the public, no, but we need to do that tasting, and sometimes we don't even be able to do it. So that is one thing. And the second thing is like subsidies are also very important, but also they need to be targeted. You can't just subsidize everything to keep people happy. You need to be a little bit more intelligent. So for example, I'm talking just exclusively in agriculture. Sometimes subsidies are, for example, to subsidize fertilizers or water or something like that, instead of having a better plan. So that is what one of the things that I would like to kind of, or sometimes I want to have a better adaptation from the government. And this is because all your projects and as well the government need to be very interdisciplinary. So the problem is that the communications between research centers and the government, they are not always kind of like overlap. So I think that, for example, in my case, our team is super interdisciplinary. We have bioinformaticians, crop scientists. I work with bacteria, and the good thing is we are so different that at the same time we were able to do this, for example, this cabinet very quick or kind of quick because of that, because we speak different languages, but with the same aim. So I feel that the government also needs to be in that terms, like be more open, having not just lawyers or people that works in economic or something like that. So that is my point.
Yeah, I would completely follow Marcela
I'd like
on
to
that
add on.
one. Oh, sorry, John. Sorry about that. I completely second on that. I think that where there needs to be a change is really in the attitudes, I think, because the experience we have from the government, at least here in Spain and in Barcelona, is that the policy is always reactive, right? If it's not allowed specifically and there is a framework for it, it's just a no and a no and a no and a no, and we're not interested, and we don't want us to tell you your stories about innovative stuff like this is new, we don't know it, we don't want to know it. So I think in this case it's about recognizing that there is a priority here that needs to be addressed, and what I would like to see is kind of this change in attitude, and like, okay, you want to develop urban farming, well, that's great because that's what we need. So you know, since there isn't a law that says you can't do it, well, we'll help you figure out how you actually can, right? So that's kind of what I would like to see in that sense. And I think particularly in the food sector, from regulators, it would be interesting to see frameworks being developed that regulate urban farming on a different level than currently the frameworks we have that regulate industrial farming in a certain way, right? That essentially doesn't really apply to urban farming, or at least not in all its aspects. So I think it would be interesting to look into maybe a more loose framework that would encourage urban farmers to start doing their businesses without, of course, just being beyond regulation, because that's not the point, but making it accessible for people to start businesses in that sense.
I'll follow on from that if I may. I think I completely see the same points and concur with Loïc and Marcela. I think the transdisciplinary aspect of small teams for future innovation that works is very important and should be encouraged a lot more by innovative support groups, administrations, to the policy level. I think also it's true, especially true. I've had a very similar experience as Loïc, that if you come up with an idea, it's usually no, particularly with land use. I think in Barcelona, there is a strong community of innovators that just get up and do things anyway. But I've seen a lack of finance, a lack of understanding, a lack of time, and essentially a lack of support for young innovators who are generating new ideas, new ways to work, often with hard work and sweat. But they're doing this from experience. They have experience. They know what they're doing. Loïc, for example, is, studies in agronomy and can teach a lot of people about how these things can work in a technical level. But coming back to policy, I think that there is change. I was recently before COVID, recently at a European Commission Directorate meeting, which was transdisciplinary. It was between the agricultural DC and those working with computation. And there was a strong representative from biologists there as well. And it was very important that they were there, because we should all be listening to biologists and agrologists before anyone else. So they were trying, the European Commission were at least trying. They have some funding, and they are, I would say, going to start subsidizing things in a better way. But we have still a lag. There's always a reaction. And that needs to be implemented on a community level at small scale. And I say that crucially, at a small scale. There has been a tendency, even with innovation, to support the industrial existing setup who are not fast enough to react and are by nature too big to be able to deal with the problem. And I think if we work on literally a smaller scale of operations in a local way with innovation that works locally, I think that we may be onto something. But there's still subsidies for diesel. There's still subsidies for petrochemicals. There's still subsidies for massive farm equipment. So maybe we need to change where that money goes and start to look at land use in a different way too.
Yes, I love all those points. Fajar, you want to add on this? Go for it.
Yeah, I think I want to add, I want to give some perspective from the emerging countries or developing countries like Indonesia. Because the fact is the technology innovations in Indonesia is not the concern of the government yet, especially for the hardware technology, because the government has a lot of things to do in developing countries. So this is very hard for us, for engineers, for innovators, for everyone to develop technology in our country. But I think there's a chance for us. Maybe we can solve it from the region perspective, like Southeast Asia maybe can make region regulations or region policies. I know that like a country like Singapore, that they have advanced technology in agriculture, aquaculture, and I think they have a lot of human research that can support the potential of natural research in Indonesia. So I think that problem that mentioned by Marcela or Jonathan or Loïc, maybe that can it can be solved with the region policies. Maybe in the EU regions, it can be solved from the EU perspective, so that every country collaborate to solve every problems in every country, so that they can give like some perspective, so they can collaborate to solve that problem.
I love that. Thank you for that insight as well. That's why we want the international perspectives. One thing I wanted to add to everything you guys said, first of all, let's trust the biologists and the scientists. As a scientist, I love that too. But the second one, on a more serious note, is that actually there's this sandbox model that started out in fintech, where basically it was regulators and governments basically allowing innovators to try out a new model with much fewer regulations and trying things in a more open setting and then seeing how it worked. And so bit by bit, this is being taken over into agtech especially. Malaysia is at the forefront of this, running some beautiful trials. If you're interested, look it up, Sandbox Innovation Model Malaysia or something like that, which is a really great way of drawing in the policymakers and allowing entrepreneurs to try things in a setting that isn't like, that is more kind of like a safe space, and where they can then directly talk with policymakers, which is a really interesting model. And I'm really intrigued to see where that will develop into. I want to loop back to something that kind of Jonathan touched on when he was talking about the effects that COVID had on him, which was, he was talking about how farm to fork was now 10 meters, which is brilliant and must be like the freshest food you can get. But so I was wondering, in your views, you know, you're all working on hardware solutions, you've all seen what's going on. And we need, now that, you know, we've had COVID, we've had the pandemic, everybody's looking at trying to source food more locally, countries are looking at being more self-sufficient. And what role do you think hardware innovations can play into kind of providing a safer, perhaps more traceable food system? And maybe, you know, are there some great innovations that you know, or does your solution directly plug into this? Yeah, to make the food system a safer space.
Was that directed to me? It broke slightly, so I got the theme, but
it was directed at all of you. If you understood enough, feel free to launch into it. If some of the others want to save you, then I will let them jump into it.
Well, I can just speak a little bit about that.
A little bit. I'll let somebody else.
I think Marcela, continue, and hopefully Jonathan's internet will come back. He is muted, so he's not ready to jump in. Marcela, you got this. Oh, but you're muted.
Sorry.
There you go.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking in this case with this situation with COVID, I think we need to be a little bit more open-minded and do not give everything by like it's going to be there all when you need it. So I think, for example, in our case, we could just think, oh, this was a really bad timing. I wanted to have a better prototype because it's better to present it to investors or something like that. But you need to take like the good side of the situation and take advantage. I know that it's a very, very difficult situation. It's like really bad cases in all over the world, but we also need to take advantage of this and say, okay, what can I do to improve this? So if you have the minimal idea, or you say, I think this could help, then try it or speak with someone else, or just put it there, because sometimes you think that this is very stupid or an idea, but actually you don't know how good could be. In this case, for example, this cabinet at the beginning was, oh, it's very, very, I don't know, crazy idea, because the speed breeding is there is amazing growth chambers and everything. But also we thought, okay, but not all the research centers have like £500,000 to spend in speed breeding. So when you think it's something is already there, like a very good product, maybe you can do it, you can improve it, and you never know. So just in that case, you always try to look at the other side of the story. And if it's something a difficult situation,
just try to take advantage. In this case, we really needed to organize our company. So what was the best moment to than this, that we couldn't work in the prototype, like to organize the company. So that is, just wanted to say that.
I love your little shout out to all the entrepreneurs out there. Just, if you're thinking of it, just make it happen. Wikifactory and Thought for Food have got communities set up to support you, to connect you, to helping systems, to documentation, to people who are going to want to dive right into whatever you're doing. So if you're thinking of starting something, like, come find us. But the rest of our panel, what do you think is going to happen? Are we going to get used to our food not being there all the time? Are we going to go back to seasonal? Is hardware going to come and save us all?
All right, I'll take that one. So is hardware going to save us all? I like the question. No, I don't think so, honestly. I think technology can go a long way. I'm most familiar, let's say, with aquaponics, so I mean, I can tell you that it makes plants grow faster. We can grow more per square meter than we could on an open field. We can do that by using less resources. So technology definitely helps, and hardware helps, but I don't think ultimately we can rely on technology to solve all our problems. I think inherently it comes down to, I think, the conception we have of the world and our supply chains and the relationship we have with it. We tend to be really disconnected with where food comes from, and I think that's probably why things are the way they are today, because not because we're fundamentally I think bad, but just because we're ignorant. We're not connected to it, so there is no reason we should know. But really, if it comes down to a problem of surface, so yes, we can solve, I think through hardware, we can solve part of the demand supply problem in urban areas, meaning that around a city like Barcelona, for example, that's kind of what we're trying to do here. I can imagine in the future, let's say, really intensive going on in the suburb of the city and the periphery of the city, supplying that same city, part of it, maybe from the city itself. I mean, Barcelona, as an example, has about 50% of its surface as rooftops that are not used. So there's definitely potential there, but that will never replace the millions of hectares we need to produce food. And I think most of the food production will always stay soil and land based. And really there's so many aspects to take into account, but I think one of them is obviously reducing meat consumption, which resource wise is something that, I mean, I think most of you guys are familiar with already, that it just takes so many more resources to produce the same amount of protein, let's say, of meat than it does for plants. So I think it has to go many ways. Also, technology is not always a good thing. Sometimes we tend to invest billions and billions of dollars of trying to find an alternative planet, and we're not able to spend a fraction of that budget just like trying to improve this one. So I think, yeah, the approach is probably what has to change in that sense. That's just my grain of salt.
I love it. And interesting to hear that you don't think the future is on Mars. That could have been one answer. Cool. So Nico, you're muted yourself as well. Do you want to add to this topic?
No, I thought just wanted to also big up that answer. No fish on Mars yet.
Well, who knows? Green and Blue could be the first one to bring the fish to Mars. I don't know if you've spoken to the right people yet, Loïc. That could be the way.
We're not supposed to talk about it just yet.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm giving the secret away. No, I love that. Well, I'm loving what I'm hearing because I can feel your passion as well for what you're doing and for how that can lead to solutions. I think one, like, you know, staying on this topic of like how hardware can help, and I guess also a little bit of how COVID affected things. You know, Loïc is telling us from a very like developed, like big city perspective. Fajar, we've heard, you know, you're in a developing country, your farmers are quite different, you're not working with people who are growing things in their houses. Do you think during COVID, did everybody maybe get connected a little bit more? They went online a little bit more? Is there a way to including people more, and then that way maybe getting more hardware solutions used by farmers, for example, and supporting the food and ag system through this?
Yeah, actually, I don't have the data about that yet for Banoo projects, but actually now I'm working on other projects. We call it hydro agro in Indonesia. Basically, it's like an hydroponics and aquaponics things like that. But we train some farmers through online. From the COVID conditions, we get a lot of tractions. So in February, we just get only 50 farmers, and in July, we got about 420 farmers. So basically, this COVID-19 is make the farmers make them more online. So they access the mobile phone a lot and try to do a lot of things to develop themselves, to get a lot of things, a lot of insights, and develop themselves to join hydroponics and aquaponic things to develop their agriculture.
Amazing, that's quite the traction you had. Thanks for sharing. One more thing, because we are talking hardware today. So one question I want to ask you all, and so Wikifactory is really about open sourcing and the sharing community. And if you go on there, I can highly recommend checking it out. There's some wonderful projects, including these 4 here, where it basically gives you instructions on how to build it. And so the whole community is about using that, developing it further, and basically getting the knowledge from people such as these 4 wonderful panelists today, and then being able to take these things away and growing them yourselves. And Nico, you can jump in if I'm not describing it well. But I guess to the panel, what I want to ask is, you know, why did you go for an open source model and not for what many entrepreneurs would say is like the more common model of protecting things using patents and not sharing what you're doing with the world? And what do you think maybe some of the advantages of that are? Maybe Jonathan, we haven't heard from you in a sec. Do you want to go first?
Sure, I think possibly my connection is a little unstable, being where I am, but certainly I think in many ways the opposite of having an intellectual property and closing down information, we may actually begin to talk about the morality of closing down information in the face of things like a pandemic, food scarcity. It's like saying, if there was a COVID-19 cure, would you open source that, or would you privatize it? And I think in some ways, particularly when we are talking about hardware, I've had a very positive and interesting experience from a business perspective, because they don't necessarily cancel each other out. So if you have an open hardware model, what you're really doing is actually having access to a multitude and a large scale community development or research and development group. So rather than doing it in-house, you're doing it outsourced, but with many, many more people. And it becomes market driven. So people customize these tools following their demand, which is a much more efficient model than trying to predict a market or change a market or convince a market that they need what you have. So if you're directly in contact with people who are the end users, it becomes a lot more efficient. But in pure financial terms, we were able to sell the BeeHives and the hardware kits, regardless of their open source nature. So you can open source the bits of information, but you can never open source the atoms, the actual material. So that becomes in many ways business as usual. And we found that to be quite successful. Yet we very much appreciate it when people make innovation model. But I think one key aspect is services, that the hardware that you're creating offers a service to a community that is appreciated, and in some ways they would be happy to pay for that. But we chose, to come back to your question, we chose both for open source BeeHives and for Rummy to open source our designs, because we thought it was for a global good, not just for humans, but for the natural world too. So there was a kind of ecological impetus for us to start these programs. So that was very much the driver of why we chose to open source, because we think it's good for customizing to different locations.
Brilliant, love it. Does anybody else want to add on to that lovely answer? Marcela.
Yeah, well, actually, even if now I'm in Denmark, where I don't have any or almost no limit in terms of what I want to do the research, and also the rest of my team are in UK, we are actually all coming from countries where we struggle at the beginning to do some of our research. Estrella is from India, Luis is from Venezuela, Oscar, Ricardo, and I, we are from Mexico. And we have been in the other side where you want to do something and you can't access because maybe you don't have the right equipment or you don't have the money to do it. So when starting for that is like, okay, we want to make this accessible to more people. We want to put this technology because it's very important. It's basically the new green revolution, and if we just keep it in certain parts of the world, they already have a lot of resources in crop improvement, then we are going to make this bridge bigger and bigger between rich farmers and poor farmers. So that was one of the first things. And the second is we don't have like a money to make this company bigger or to have a lot of improvement. When you have an open access, this in terms of economic, when you have an open access, actually the community can give you feedback. So everything that, for example, you put your prototype in Wikipedia, it's not just your expertise, but it's also the expertise of everyone in the world. They can tell you, oh, why you don't use this, or why you don't use the other, or I know about this material. So that makes like a kind of like a global team, and everyone, and there is a lot of people in the world that want to help and want to do good things. It's not just a few people. So that is a really good as well. If you don't have like the no resources to fund a company from scratch or to file a patent or something like that. So you can start with this, with open access, and then make improvements. And as well, there is business even with open access IPs. There is still things that you can do. It's not like you are going to lose your product and that's it. And as well, like if we have an open access, more people can hear about this technology, and then we have people interested, not only as a clients, but also have people that get, okay, I can maybe put this amount of money, not much, but this, so, or the type of angels, instead of just having everything protected and then your idea is never going to go out because you don't have that push of being free, being there.
Thank you so much. Nico, from the Wikifactory perspective, I do want you to build on this, please, because I'm sure you've seen lots of examples and you know why Wikifactory is open source and why it's a great thing. So I'll let you add on to what the other two have really nicely shown what they want to do.
Sure, absolutely. I think from Wikifactory, what we are really seeing is, I mean, we are a really diverse platform to start with. We have projects that are open source. We also have projects that are have decided to have a private repository and are kind of developing their business, perhaps you could say more traditionally, without sharing some of their design files and the bits, as John mentions, more openly. But I think really to really build on what both Marcela and John were saying, I think the question we are seeing from Wikifactory, it's no longer a binary, you know, between open source and IP. I think really both things can work in tandem, and often do complement each other quite well. I think what we're seeing is a lot of projects really innovating the way that they open source some of their design files, some of their start to share some of their not only project documentation and the sort of how-to guides to sort of get started, which definitely helps the sort of the research and development side, which I think was also mentioned, when a lot of startups don't have that capacity to immediately engage in research and development. But it's I think it's also an interesting way for projects, we find, to sort of build communities. And we heard a lot about that at the beginning of this webinar, which is, you know, the current crisis has sort of, I think, seen a lot of people find harbor in networks and communities. And all of a sudden, we're seeing a lot of projects suddenly find an incredible resource in the networks and the communities that are built around products, both products and projects. And so we have this sort of these communities of practice that sort of grow around different projects. And I think some of our most successful projects on Wikifactory are really those ones that are experimenting between open sourcing sometimes some elements of their design, which the platform sort of allows you to say, okay, well, look, you know, we're going to have the basic elements of this design. Maybe to give one example of a more high-end sort of, this is a transport technology project around a group of crowdsourced engineers called R-Loop, who started to crowdsource engineering expertise around the Hyperloop project that was created by Tesla, or started by Tesla and Elon Musk. And so it was this very sort of high-end, very competitive project with a lot of, you know, incredible engineers sort of competing, and companies competing to sort of develop this incredible technology, or very cutting edge technology. And they very much opted for the crowdsourcing side, and they hosted the project, well, not the R-Loop project, but they hosted the R-Flight, which was a flying device mechanism on Wikifactory. And I think what's interesting there is, you know, such a project is basically saying, look, we have some components that we want to actually make public. We want people to engage with and to develop on their own, and to sort of build this community around a hardware design or project, in the sense to also build a community of users, but also to engage people in the design and the making process. So I think we're seeing these incredible changes on Wikifactory in a sort of a shift in culture, as well as mentality, in how people do approach hardware projects from both an open innovation standpoint, but also from a business point of view. And that's incredibly reassuring, I think, because, as we said, it's sort of not a binary thing. But maybe I could, Loïc, could I maybe get some of your idea? Because you also, Aquaponics was an incredible open source project, and I think that had its run as an open source design. We have that on Wikifactory still. What was your experience with open source innovation and Aquaponics?
All right, so I would go into the direction that I think you've already laid out, but it is that I believe the hybrid approach is really what can work. We started the project 5 years ago, Aquaponics, wanting to believe we could do everything open source and run a business from that, and we wanted to really bad, and we tried, and we were able to get the kits out there, and they worked, and we had a really good experience with prototyping, with digital fabrication, which really allowed us to go from the idea to having a working prototype in a way we could have never done otherwise. So I think it helped us a lot in our early stage of development and getting, say, proof of concepts out there. Apart from the fact that, I mean, we launched a crowdfunding campaign. It was a design that was for everybody, so we're actually able to fund that development with the community. So I think in that sense, it worked out pretty well. And we got the first, let's say, start of aquaponics community, mostly here in Barcelona, but also abroad. We had people build the kits in the UK that suddenly sent us a picture of their kit that they built, and they make some changes. And so that was really nice to see. And at the same time, at some point, we had this realization that if you're a technology-based business or company, if you give away your technology entirely for free, it's just the math don't add up. So at that point, we diversified and we decided to, of course, keep the open source developments and leave them out there for the community to use and change and edit in the way they wish. But at the same time, let's say in the direction we went was more consulting based, where we've been developing our technology for a bunch of years now. And so part of what sustains our company is the fact that that is knowledge that it's just not completely open out there to everyone. So on the one hand, it's been a bit of a disappointment on a philosophical level. And at the same time, I think it's a really interesting evolution, because we ended up finding out it didn't have to be either entirely open source or entirely closed. So you can find a combination of both that strengthens your business and communication around it, etc., and at the same time sustain your business with more, let's say, protected technologies. So that's our experience with that.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's very interesting to hear your experience, Loïc, also on that, also from a business perspective, and how that's worked. I guess I wanted to turn to another general question. Any of you can jump into, but and maybe to wrap up on this one, Marie. But I guess we wanted to know perhaps what advice you maybe all had for up and coming entrepreneurs or product developers, sort of going forward based on your experience, and any thoughts for people maybe starting out in this sector of sort of food growing and food systems, agtech, etc. So general question, whoever wants to jump in on that.
Maybe I can answer that question. My suggestion is for the entrepreneurs or product developers is, I think we just should jump into a lot of projects. Like my experience in hydro-agro projects, actually, I don't know at all about the hydroponics or aquaponic things, but from one event in accelerator or incubator in Malaysia, I just the program and try to understand about the hydroponics and aquaponics, and then try to know about that things. And after that, from my capabilities in mechanical engineering and product developers, what can I do to help that projects to develop? So the collaboration is, I think, it's not about the IP or the open source, but it's all about the collaborations. And we just should jump into the other projects, know about the other country problems, like in a lot of sectors. But for my opinion, if in my capability in agriculture, so I just want to jump to the agriculture sector in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and I just want to give contribution from my capabilities in mechanical engineering.
Fantastic. Thank you, Fajar. Thank you. Anyone else?
Well, yeah, I want like a follow as well there, what Fajar was saying. Well, it's
collaboration is super important. So in my case, I work mostly in the bacteria plant interaction, and that is like my principal job in the lab. But having this collaboration as well with the plant plant scientists and looking in terms of breeding and plant development gives you a lot of vision, and as well to have this kind of projects, like for example trying to build a company or trying to innovate, not only works in the case that you want to have a company. Also, for example, in my case, it works a lot in terms when I need to write a grant proposal for a research project in my lab. So it's not fighting with my job in the lab. So I can have that mind like it's expanding, and now I can like oh, what if we introduce this, or what if we introduce? So for example, something that will never happen before in the lab, but like why we don't introduce a robot that can scan this and this and this? So having these kind of extra projects not always need to be fighting with your job or something like that. Sometimes you don't have the position of leaving your job and put a company, but that doesn't mean that you can't have fun doing these kind of things. And that is the important thing. Like if you have a side project, you need to have fun, because if you don't have the opportunity to leave everything, then you need to put a lot of passion and everything, but also you can take advantage of that and improve the work that you are doing at in your principal job or something like that. But collaboration is everything. When you start to speak with people and then you met more people, you have a network, and suddenly if you have a question, you just very quick jump and say like, oh, how can I do this? So I just wanted to follow about that. I think for me collaboration is very, very important. Or how my mom always was saying, it's better to have friends than money, because they can help you much than money sometimes.
Absolutely, I second that. John or Loïc, any advice for people following in your footsteps, maybe?
Okay, so I'll take that. Leave the last one for John. I think it's really interesting what Marcela said, because we tend to think of it as one only alternative. I need to make a living from this. So sometimes that's the case, and sometimes it's not. You can totally, and maybe you can actually tinker much more freely and with less pressure when your livelihood doesn't depend on it. So I think the point there is that before you start out, try to figure out what's your goal, like in what framework you want to do that. Do you want to do that for a living? You want to depend on that, and in that case, you're going to have to find a way to fund that. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you want to do this on the side. Maybe you want to just share what you discovered, and I think that's just as valid. But when you start out, you should have an answer to that in some way, because if you're not sure about that part, you might lose just many years working on something. And we, as technical people, which I think most of us are on the panel, and probably many of the people listening to us today, we tend to have this just like kind of passion to just start tinkering, because we really love this technology or whatever it is that we found out. And we kind of skip the question of, is this useful? Do people actually need that? How am I going to market that? How am I going to make a business out of that? So they sound like really boring questions, but I think my top advice in the end is, if you want to decide to make a living with that idea, then before you do anything and before you lift a screwdriver, like sit down with a piece of paper, do your business plan and see how it's going to work out. And it doesn't mean that you have to sell a product necessarily. It can also just mean that you need to have the structure or connections to get government subsidies, and whichever way that works out for you. But I think that would be my sobering party pooper advice to you out there.
I think that's very sound advice, Loïc. So thank you everyone for sharing. Marie, what do you suggest? Shall we go on to maybe fielding some Q&A from our live audience?
I mean, I would love to, but we are already at the end of our hour and a half.
Okay.
So we are going to have to wrap it up. I'm very intrigued how Jonathan is now with us twice and Nico on one feed. But Jonathan, if you have some final words on maybe why you love being an entrepreneur or what you want others to bear in mind, then on either of your profiles, you can unmute yourself and quickly, because we do want to end on time, you know, round it up with some words from your side.
Yeah, sorry for that. Can you hear me okay from this connection?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, my computer overheated in the sun, so I'm going mobile, very mobile now. So yeah, I followed that, and I think all of the comments are really empowering and relevant to future innovators and entrepreneurs who want to develop something that works across all planes. I really do want to come back to something that Marcela said about a transdisciplinary team. I think that is really crucial. Having people that you enjoy being around as humans, as part of your team, is crucial. And not to force yourself into situations that you don't feel comfortable with, because probably there's a reason for that. It comes out later. But if in terms of the development and launching of a company, something that is of a product, something that is great is the open source nature, because it automatically means community, and is great publicity as well. We went through various crowdfunding campaigns that helped, went that route, we've been every other route. But there are people out there who can help, who can support, reach out to them. They're very happy to help usually. So do reach out to communities. But again, tinkering, just keep trying, keep knocking off the corners. Don't give up. It's always possible. We stand on the shoulders of giants, and there's a lot of people out there who can help.
Love it. Thank you, Nico. Jonathan, in fact.
Amazing,
it is a first that we've had someone in on two devices and one moving and the other one kind of. But it is, what you said though was really great. So I'm very happy you found a way to still be able to give us that insight. We did say we would stop on time. We were already a little bit over, but for those of you who maybe missed a little bit of the beginning, of course, like always, this session was recorded and the link is going to be available as well as a summary as well. We started off a little bit talking around how COVID affected some of these amazing startups and projects that we have here. We've heard about how these guys have changed, maybe how they worked. They focused more on the business side of their project. They made some iterations that before they were maybe too busy to do. And then eventually they all pivoted in a way that they were able to reach the people they were working with in a great way. We then briefly touched on the policies and how policies should, you know, try to keep pace with innovation a bit better because they're always falling behind and in some ways are restricting what innovators can do. I also really enjoyed having the view from a developing country where agriculture and where even cities are a little bit different, or the reality is a bit different, and having the other side of very developed country where people started growing plants maybe in their houses or looking at ways that they can get food in a slightly different way. And then of course we touched on why have a open hardware, open sourced hardware even solution, and how maybe even it doesn't need to be entirely open sourced, and there are ways to combine open source and protected projects, which is really fascinating, and I think something that if you are an entrepreneur is really worth listening to and finding out about more. The big theme, I think, was to collaborate, to get a spirit of like-minded people together, to get more and more people looking at what you're doing, to offer equal opportunities no matter where you are, you know, giving that technology, making it available to everybody to use and to get ahead. And finally, we heard really nice, inspirational ideas from our innovators and why, you know, you should be an entrepreneur and maybe what they learned in their early stages. But the overall thing there was just like, keep going, keep trying, just play with it. But also just before you start playing with it, maybe be aware of, you know, if it's just a side project that you're doing for fun, or if this is going to be, you know, your job for life. But it was an absolute joy having this discussion today, and I learned a lot. And we have people in very different settings, and I'm glad that Nico, see, I'm getting confused. Jonathan found ways to be with us. The links of, you know, the projects that we have here, Wikifactory and TFF, are in the chat or will be in a second. So do come and check us out, check the projects out. TFF is going to have more live sessions coming up. So do have a look at our website. And Wikifactory is doing wonderful things as well. So do check us out. And Nico, for you, I will leave to wrap up the session.
Yes, thank you, Marie. I think you've really said it all, but yeah, really to echo your words, it's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to share such incredible, valuable knowledge and experience with 4 incredible panelists and 4 incredible projects. And so, yeah, really thank you to our 4 participants for joining. 2 of the participants here today, John from Open Source BeeHives, and Romy and Loïc from Green and Blue. I know personally from the Green Fab Lab, and I'm really thrilled that both of you were able to share your incredible knowledge, passion, and experience here today. So thank you. Fajar from Banoo and Marcela from GrowCab. We've just met recently, and I'm really thrilled to hear more about your projects and more about the incredible experience and process that you have gone to developing these different hardware and IoT solutions. And we really look forward to bringing you on board and helping your projects grow on Wikifactory. So yeah, I guess I wanted to maybe wrap up with a little bit of maybe plug in the FabX event, live event. I think I'm not sure if the link is in there, that we will be, our co-founder, Christina Rebel, will be co-hosting on the 31st, I think, of July, later this month, on the first Digital FabX event. So please join that. I think it'll be an incredible conversation, and I'm sure a lot of you, and it will touch on a lot of the topics that we've already covered today. And otherwise, yeah, thank you, Marie, and thank you, Thought for Food, for this incredible joint webinar. And I hope the first of many to come. And yeah, really look forward to even hearing more and inviting our panelists back, hopefully, to discuss more about their projects and businesses and ideas going forward. So asante sana, thank you very much. And yeah, hope you're all well and keeping in good health in these tough times, wherever you are.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nico. And thank you to all the panelists.
Thanks a lot for having us.
Have a great evening or morning, wherever you are.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks to you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
You guys.